what should be done to avoid future implications around the public debt? Let's have more on this story. We return to discuss with you on what also you think in regards to public debt. Make sure you click the comment there and let us know what you're thinking.
The central bank said the ratio of debt service to tax revenues is projected to average 30% between financial year 2020 to 2021 and financial year 2024 to 2025. During this period, a continuous increase in debt service costs may crowd out other priority spending. Penny Nambabazi, the program's officer under Debt and Aid Department at Siatini, Uganda, says that why we are currently having this situation is because of continuous borrowing, and more so since the money borrowed gets misused.
It's, of course, part of a country's way of financing development is through borrowing, and there's no problem with borrowing, but it's usually for what is it for, what is it being utilized for, and whether it's actually being met, the purpose for borrowing is actually being met. So as Uganda, we first got debt relief in 1996, and Uganda was one of the first countries that qualified for debt relief as part of the highly indebted poor countries that sought debt relief from creditors that were being, of course, in anticipation of getting the debt that they had already lent out to the country to be paid off. So as that background, we came from having concessional creditors such as the IMF, the World Bank, who supported Uganda through loan financing. Mainly that was to make sure that as a country we could be able to finance our development, because already from how we have domestic financing already as a country, it has been challenged over the years. So that is mainly entailing the bits of taxation, how we have had to get external help, and that is through financing externally through the loans. And then we also have the non-concessional creditors, who are mainly, as today as we now see the trend for China to be financing a lot of Africa's development, and also other private creditors that have come on board since then. So there's been a shift, as well as a financing architecture shift to how countries are trying to be able to get a lot of assistance in regard to loan financing from different creditors.
Many countries have been borrowing, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's very crucial for us to know how to deal with this burden before it's out of hand already.
What can we do right now currently? We really, as Siatini Uganda, our main focus is in ensuring that we do transfer now the discussion from borrowing into what exactly are we utilizing this money for. Can we be able to see that the investment that we're doing currently is bringing into a return? There's a return in investment. If we say that we are putting a lot of loan financing into infrastructure, are those projects that we're looking at actually going to be fully absorbed? Especially looking at the report from the Office of the Auditor General, there have been a lot of queries over time on absorption of funds, absorption of these big projects that have been taken on. How much are we able to actually ensure that we get full utilization of this money, but also have a quick return in investment? And also, we know there's been more priority put in infrastructure as an engine to productivity, as a driver really to productivity. But we know over time we tend to forget that we also have other sectors that can actually boost productivity in the sense of manufacturing. How much are we actually putting into such sectors? Agro-industry. When it comes to also the bit of how much we are actually able to also build the capacity of our members of parliament, the oversight role that they're trying to do. How best can we show that we can ensure that such capacities for institutions like the parliament are able to also be boosted in this time to make sure that while they are also receiving a lot of loans for approval, they have been able to do a lot of analysis, but also been able to be guided on the best way we can be able to get a lot of return in some of these loans that we have already taken on, what has been put already on ground for our people. But also to add more is mainly also on the bit of transparency and accountability. We mainly are ensuring that already from the reputation, I think I could say quality reputation that debt has come with in Uganda, there's a lot of non-appreciation from the public because a lot of transparency is still not coming out clearly. A lot of loans have been taken on, but we want to see on our side what transparency is coming out. Has that information been widely circulated to the public? Has there been a lot of citizen participation and inclusiveness of key stakeholders in this discussion? Aside the technical people that are already on board, what more can we do to make sure that this information is widely circulated, to ensure that we get appreciation from the public that, oh yes, the country is actually currently borrowing this kind of money, but we have been able to see services delivered from key sectors like health and education. Has there been that kind of appreciation coming through? So we need to be able to see that such appreciation is widely encouraged, not only to see that sectors that are grappling, that have had to grapple throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, can at least in this time of the new financial year that is yet to come in, would be planned for effectively, to see that services are brought closer to the people, and also to see that there's a lot of recovery in the sense that we can see more sectors get prioritized to be also in the driver's lane of creating a lot of productivity for the country.
In the long term, the Uganda government debt to GDP is projected to trend around 51.30% of GDP in 2022 and 52% of GDP in 2023, according to our econometric models. Better yet, how can we manage this debt?
What we can see also is that a lot has to be done. There has to be a lot of reform in the policies regarding to how best we can manage our debt. But also when we talk about debt sustainability, are we also trying to look into the current issues that are affecting our country regarding that time when we had challenges with financing our own development, still as now today, but there's been a total shift in shocks, economic shocks. So much has been brought a lot of pressure in regard to our exchange rate. When we're doing a lot of this borrowing right now, our shilling today is not as strong as it was before, or even had a bit of strength to be able to say that while so many of these loans are coming from external creditors, we should be sure enough to ensure that our exchange rate, the external shocks that we do grapple with today, we can be able to see how to mitigate some of these issues. And mainly it's through production, and especially in times like this when we know that so many times we have been able to pull around the discussion of having agriculture boosted, the manufacturing industry also boosted. Today is actually a better time to see that so many of these sectors are given the resources that can be able to generate enough revenue, as well as also ensure that our own institutions are also able to have more leeway to be able to question, especially like Parliament, their oversight role in some of these discussions. So we cannot say that we are going to stop and look at how best to look at the debt burden today without borrowing more, because it's inevitable.
The Debt Sustainability Analysis, DSA, indicates that external debt burden and public debt indicators remain moderate. This is owed to the fact that although the financial year 2020 to 2021 fiscal deficit widened to 9.1% of gross domestic product, bringing public debt to 48.3% of GDP from 41.7% in financial year 2019 to 2020, and closer to the 50% of GDP target. The fiscal target for financial year 2021 to 2022 reflects post-COVID-19 consolidation with a fiscal deficit of GDP to GDP of 6.4%.
6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6.4%. 6 very well. Borrowing is very inevitable for most of the countries, or for even
For all countries.
not even just a country. Borrowing is like very inevitable for everyone. Like at some point you feel like you want to borrow. If not money, you want to borrow a cup, you want to borrow a flask, you want to borrow you want to borrow what is that?
Am I forgetting the name?
You want to borrow a charger, adapter. No, it's not an adapter.
It's not an adapter. It's
What is happening on a Monday like this? Why am I forgetting? You want to borrow, we're going to remember it. But speaking about the public debt around the country, it's still making up,
It's a power bank.
I was supposed to remember that, not you, but thank you. A power bank, you need to borrow a power bank at some point. But a public debt is still a discussion that needs stakeholders to pull up their salts, to make sure they discuss relevancy angles on how we cannot just continue borrowing, but how can we borrow at an expected interest rate that is favorable or fairly, to make sure at the end of the day we're able to pay off the debt. You can borrow, Joram, but if you're unable to pay back in time, that means you're a problem.
Well,
or you're facing challenges.
and one of the things that I did love about what Perrin and Babazi did say here is that borrowing has never been a problem, but how much do we, or how effectively do we use the money that we've borrowed? Because as a nation, that is a very big question to answer. That we may find ourselves in situations where we clearly need debt, whereby we have to apply for loans from maybe international donors, or we apply for loans from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, but how are we going to get it back? Or even when it comes to the public debt here, how are we going to use this money? Because you would clearly see that the government may actually go out for a loan of, let's say, 20 billion Ugandan shillings, and then out of the 20 billion, only 10 billion is accounted for. Where is the other 10? So those are some of those questions that we need to actually address, because if at all the money that we've used, it has actually been used for the effectiveness of why we went for it, then clearly it may not have implications on us.
And you're
but
very
if at all we
right.
wrongly use it, then we have no
Speaking
accountability
about
whatsoever.
misuse and money getting back into the treasury, do you remember the 100 billion for teachers? Do you remember?
For last year.
Yes.
Last year's,
Did you know that 17 million has gone back to treasury?
Wow.
17 million because it maybe lacked whom to give it.
Well, but that is
We're going
actually
to be
something, because when
following
you look
up.
at-
We're going to be following up,
if-
maybe probably
if you
around
to-
this week.
If you look at that, if the 17 million was actually pushed back.
Yeah, it went back to
the
treasury.
And yet we still have a number of teachers who are still saying they did not actually benefit
Do you know
from
reasons
such,
as to why
such
you know
recovery,
such has to happen?
funds.
I still feel there is an element of selfishness and also disorganization among people who are there to distribute, or maybe disorganization among distribution channels from where and when we're going to be getting the funds. And not just that money, it's not about only teachers' money going back to treasury. We have seen COVID-19 fund reliefs that government actually released, and even government still gets that money. It was even borrowing that money either domestically or it was from IMF, because IMF doesn't just donate Uganda money, it does not just give funds to the country, it gives it as a loan. So when funds are out there and you hear in the end they're going back to into the treasury, that means somehow, somewhat, something didn't happen rightly. Someone feared accountability or something wrong happened around there. But away from the treasury and getting back, we're also looking at the cost that comes with the very huge debt that a country owes other countries or other nations, and then it's impacted onto the lives of citizens. For example, we're now looking at how fuel prices have refused, to go down, are still constant. They are not even refusing. This is upon maybe a policy maker to just declare something, and then something is done in regards to fuel. We're seeing product or commodity items or item commodities are still shooting up. Why is it like that? And you know, government is leaving it like that because they are still wanting to collect an amount that is going to be mitigated in paying out this particular debt. So in the end, you see how the citizen is going, you know, to be the one squeezed under someone's shoe.
Very true. And speaking of the same amount of the debt burden, according to the debt sustainability analysis, the external debt burden and public debt indicators still remain moderate as of now. But this was all to the fact that although the financial year 2020-2021 fiscal deficit widened to 9.1% of the GDP, it brought the public debt to 48.3%, still clearly pushing to the 50% mark of the GDP from the initial 41.7% financial year 2019 to 2020. And then the physical target for financial year 2021 to 2022, if you're to look at this, reflects on post-COVID-19 consolidation with a physical deficit to GDP of 6.4%. So clearly, we are looking at COVID-19 consolidation. As a matter of fact, COVID-19 recovery. It is one of those key highlights of the coming financial year 2022 to 2023, as we are going to be looking at how best can we recover from the shocks of COVID-19.
Very well, and in case you want to understand about the deficit and the debt, you realize that debt is the money that maybe Jerome Posonko here owes me. That means in Kubanja, your debt. And then the deficit is that money that is taken in, the net money that is taken in. That means, then I'll take you back to ledger. You did economics, how you come to know about your net.
Economics.
Okay, then now you come to know about the net profit, the net. So the net is gotten after everything you have used down in your maybe asset liabilities, or you have bought stock, or the cash inflows, you have gotten all of that. So after that, that money that is left as a balance, that is the deficit out of, maybe it could be out of the debt you have used, and then there is a balance left there, that is a deficit. So Jerome Posonko was taking out through how the what amount of the deficit we were having. You were mentioning around the amount of money we were having before actually another borrowing. But you realize still, like we said earlier, borrowing is not bad, as I conclude on this one. But how are we going to begin? Because there are other authorities, even when Ministry of Finance is tabling down or budgeting for borrowing money from Chinese government, from wherever we borrow from, you realize that there are agreements that are coming with the pin or with the doubt. But again, the government is just silent about it. Do you it is still in the buzzer? So even when that is aviation authority came out to clear the air about the Entebbe International Airport not being taken by Chinese government, but still you realize that citizens, you know, emotions are out there reacting towards, you know, uncertainties that do not happen in there. No. And maybe if at some point the government would seek, it is a weak point, but really it can work at some point. You know, there are organizations, there are civil society organizations, if they are taken use of and called at the table during these decisions, maybe better planning would be made. That's my my last submission towards the public debt.
And still, furthermore, some of the things that you could look at, it is still in a worrying state for Uganda, but we do hope that we can try to look at ways on how to mitigate its effects in the long run, because if we continuously borrow and also borrow funds that we do not utilize or we wrongly utilize, then we shall feel the pinch. So it is either way, not a bad thing to borrow, but what are we using the money or the funds that we have borrowed? Well, with that, we are taking a break. After that, we have the SMB Insight, and this time we shall be looking at insurance. One, we shall be looking at the importance of insurance, and then two, the recovery process. Once a risk has occurred, how best can you follow up on your insurance covers? And also we have the weather forecast for you this particular Monday. Remember, it has actually been a cold Monday morning after let's say, a rainy Sunday night. And with that, we do take a break. We shall return with more of that.